souls. God knows you lonely souls. God knows you lonely souls.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Cloud-Based Mayhem. You've got Miles here doing the opener because Gavin's on the boat, transferring it up to Thailand, and the moisture killed his computer. So that's good for me, and hopefully that will be good for you too. On that note, let's start with housekeeping. Because I'm in charge, this week there's no housekeeping. This episode features Maxime Bellemin, blogger, pilot, author, and paragliding legend. He's written a few books that provide structure and insights into the sport we love, the mindset that's essential to not only winning competitions, but being safe in the air, and a lot of really interesting science, all folded into a very approachable and understandable way to pursue the sport that is so important to us. I think that Maxime is probably the full package, as we say here, and I think what you'll find in this fairly lengthy episode is something that works for almost everybody, whether you're a P2 pilot, a P4 pilot, a world-class PWC comp pilot. There's just a lot to learn here, and really exciting to hear this episode. So with no further ado, let's just dive into it. This week's episode, Maxime Bellemin with Gavin.
Maxime, welcome to the Mayhem. This has taken us a lot of time to put this together. You're a pretty busy guy and seem to be traveling a lot. I know you just got back from Brazil, but I've been really excited to talk to you because your books have just really drawn me in. I've really enjoyed them. So I look forward to kind of piecing them apart with you and teasing out some of the stuff that was harder to write and get your thoughts on all things paragliding. But welcome to the show and thanks for your time.
Thanks, Gavin. Thanks a lot for the invitation and also for the nice words. It's really warming, and I really appreciate that. It's been a long time since we tried to set up this conversation, and I'm really interested in having this conversation with you and sharing it with all your auditors.
Yeah, well, and let's just tuck into it right from the start. Charles gives a really good kind of opening to your books and talks about you making this really cool move in Serbia and winning the World Cup there. So we'll get into that. But your first book, I don't know if you read my review. I reviewed it for Cross Country Magazine a few months back. It kind of takes us, you talk about the personal journey and focusing on your weaknesses. I've got all kinds of notes here. I'll let you talk about the book. But first of all, why the book? Why was it carved up into two different sections? And what's your kind of background? Help the audience understand your personal background that allowed you to write these books.
All right. So first, yes, I read your article, Gavin, be aware. And I thank you for that. My personal background is I started paragliding in 1994, so a long time ago.
Sure.
And it was because I live in the Paris area, but my family is from the Alps, and I could see some crazy guys falling off the mountain for years already there. And my girlfriend at the time, she had a leave from the work for some time, and she decided to go for a training course without telling me. So when she came back, she said, "Oh, it's great." But I said, "Sure, I'm convinced it's great, but why didn't tell you? Why didn't you tell me about this?" So I made my first course in 1993 or 1994, and then. The two of us living as a couple in Paris, we only practice 10 days, max 20 days a year. So for the next 10 years, I made some very interesting progress, and I could fly 100K flights, but it was like a leisure. It was nothing more than this. What happened is that it's a bit personal, but that's how life it is. We split. And I just wondered, how could I keep on practicing this very nice sport that I really enjoy? And one of my very good friends at the time told me, "Hey, look, I tried competitions, And it's over weekends here in the French Alps, and you come and they put you in your shuttle to go up the hill, and then they give you a lunch package for the food, and then if you land out and you don't reach goal, then there is a retrieve to pick you up, and sometimes on Saturday evening there is a party. It was quite a good description of the competition
that's about what
here.
it is.
Yeah. So I tried and I bite into it. So I made a first year in the regional comps here in France, second year at the national level. Then I went for international comps, and the year after I was entering the PVC scene. So it completely changed my practice as I moved from maybe 10, 20 hours a year to 100, 120. But nevertheless, that's not a big number. And first comps I made with the top French pilot at the time, long time ago, I could see them fly, and I couldn't understand what they were doing, because it was like paramotoring for me. I thought they had an engine to do what they were doing. So I wanted to understand better the triggers and the important factors to improve my practice and to make some progress. Being an engineer, and I also have an MBA degree, still living in Paris. What you don't know is that I started my own company. The same year I started Paragliding, I founded a company, a software company. It was the early days of the GPS, so we were selling software and developing software about mapping and routing and navigation and then tour planning and so on. So I had little free time, so all my vacation time was dedicated to paragliding, so 6-7 weeks a year. But it's not enough to make the progress I wanted to make. So as I could not practice a lot, I had time during the winter to reflect on the practice and to look for what's important and how to prepare as well. Because you can fly and simply fly and fly again, and then you will make some progress. But I think that it's not only about practicing. I think the training and the preparation, as in any other kind of sport, is very important. By the way, that's why my book is split in two. So you have one first part about preparation, and the second one is about the execution, about the real flying. So I went a lot to the library to find books, to discuss with sportsmen in other disciplines or other kind of practice. And I found a frame that is used in many sports that divides the performance factors into 4 different categories, namely physical training or physical aptitudes, then the technical, then the tactical. Technique is about what you are able to do and perform, and then the tactics is related to what you do compared to others. And the fourth one is mental. And I think this one really was an edge. It was, how can I say that? To practice, we all have, at high level, we all have the same level of technique, more or less. Some are better than others, for sure, but that's granted that we all have a good technical skill set. Tactics, well, nowadays, tactics are pretty limited in what you can do to confront a gaggle. Then physical, yes, something is interesting about physical training. We are not seen as sportsmen quite often, or we don't behave as sportsmen. So I trained and I prepared my body to be prepared for long flights and to also have a better recovery and to be also fit for 6 days in a row, 7 days in a row. So I put some hours into the physical training. And then I think what made the big difference for me is the mental training. That's where I mentioned that I had a personal journey. I think it helped me not only becoming a better paragliding pilot, but also a better person, because I had to look into me and to understand the way I behave, the way I think, the way I act, the way I decide, so that I could use this better in a competitive scene. So you see, I had this approach of categorizing the performance factors into chapters. And you asked me about writing the book. In fact, writing the book only, I think I wrote this book in 2015, so 4 years ago in French. So it was after like 10 years of practice that I felt like I was ready to share and to put in a single shell all my knowledge that I was willing to share, or not only knowledge but also experience. Something that happened also is that when I started traveling for international competitions, for sure, I have friends and I have family, so I send them emails to tell them, oh, I've done this, or oh, I've done that. Oh, look, I'm not too happy with what I did here. Maybe I should improve that. So, and I was not very, what's the word? I was not very happy because I was making a lot of copy and paste into my emails from one friend to another, or to my family, to my sister, or to my father, and that was not nice, not having those personal notes. So that's when I started I set up a blog where I could share with my family and friends my little adventures. And it became obvious for me that first, I loved writing, and second, that it helped me to be honest with myself every evening about what I produced during the day, and I could recalibrate myself for the next day. So I could clearly put on paper what was good or bad, what I should improve or what I should accept, so that for the next day I would make an improvement somewhere. And with those blog entries every single day during competition, so I had a lot of stuff accumulated there. It also helped me to build an audience. And I was also part of a team. And to promote that team, we were giving conferences. And so to prepare and to run those conferences, I prepared some PowerPoint presentation where I try to put my ideas in a clear way so that they could help others to find their own way and to make their own progression. I'm not pretending I have recipes or I have answers for everything, but I think I can help to ask the right question and then to find a way to answer those questions.
Yeah, and you've done a really good job of that. You stress journaling in both books, the importance of keeping a notebook in your flight deck. This is not something I see from many pilots, but I certainly see it from some. And you take us through the journey of those four categories of physical preparation and technical ability and strategy. Mm-hmm. You take us through these really well, but you do focus on the journaling, and I find one of our recent guests, Alex Roby, does the same thing. He has a fantastic. He doesn't do many comps, but he's really good at big triangles and identifying the good days and identifying the good launch for those days, which is really important. But like you, is very limited in time. So he might get 10 days a year where he can go do these big, try to nail these big flights. And it sounds like for him as well, journaling and blogging was a really important piece of the equation.
Yeah, I listened to that podcast of Alex. I met Alex during the PVC Australia 2 years ago, and this guy is so modest and he's low profile while he's so tall and such a brilliant pilot. And I think I share many common views with him. Yes, sure. It's he's a really great guy, and I think we are. You asked him about being an engineer and the approach of an engineer. Maybe I share also the same mindset as he has.
There's so many engineers in this sport. I was the first really interesting conversation I had with Michael Vici in the 2015 X Alps was all about that, because he's an engineer, and I just find it fascinating that minds like yours, and they're certainly not like mine, are so attracted to this sport. I love it.
Yeah. The point is that we, not depending on the way our mind is built, we all have also affect and emotions, and this is something that is, should be common. And Alex didn't talk too much about this, but I would like, if I have a new possibility to talk to him, I would like to discuss with him about emotions, the way he managed this, and he explained this about being cool at the beginning of the day, and everything will be fine for him because he's picking up his days. He will never be in the air when it's a nasty day, because simply he doesn't want to do that. So and he doesn't have time to do that. And I really share this approach. That's really interesting.
Yeah, that's a great approach to risk management, isn't it? Which
you
often really don't have that. You call that out in your book, that you can't really, you shouldn't get too stressed before taking off about the weather conditions of the day if they're bad, because you're in a comp. You got to fly anyway.
Exactly, and I also use an earth rate monitor to analyze my. At first, it was to analyze my energy consumption, but there is a good correlation in between your heartbeat and the level of stress that you're feeling. It's not fully correlated, but correlation is good. And what I could see is that the lower I was, the slower my heartbeat was. So it's not totally natural, because you could expect that when you're low, you should be in a rush to find for thermal and not willing to land and so on. But no, that's where I'm the coolest person. It's when I'm low. And on the contrary, when I'm high and flying fast, that's where my heartbeat races.
You're excited where you're low. You're focused, probably.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you need all your abilities when you are low. You need to have your full concentration. You need to have your technical skills at the top, so you can squeeze every possible opportunity to climb up.
You point that out really well in the second book, in performance, that the efficiency and execution. You point that out, that often when we're going to goal, our focus becomes quite narrow, and we lose the ability to take in all the information that we've had, like you're talking about, when you're low and you're really open to every possibility. That often becomes quite narrow going into goal, and that has gotten me a bunch of times. You're just so focused on this end point that you forget that you're still flying a paraglider. You still got to take in all the information and find better lines and look at other people, and you're quite succinct about that.
Yeah, I'm also a qualified coach for paragliding since 2010, and I'm also an instructor on for cross country and SIV and so on. So I'm coaching people and groups on comps, And August this year, I coached a group of 5 pilots that went to Turkey. And once again, I can tell you there was one guy who landed short of goal, and he could not tell me about what happened. So we simply had a look at his track and at his instrument. And he simply didn't look at his instrument about it gives you a full set of information, glide ratio, efficiency, height above goal, and so on. And the instrument is just on his cockpit, 30 centimeters from his eyes, but he didn't see it. He simply didn't look at it. So, and you need to, when you make some track analysis, it helps you to come back to reality. We have lots of impressions and feelings when flying, but sometimes we have to reconnect with reality. At personal level, I think you've noticed this, and maybe you smile or laughed when you read that in the book. But during my progression, I could feel like I was dozy. I was sleeping a bit in the air after 1 hour of flying. So I used my watch to set an alarm so that it would beep, it would ring every single hour. Just to be sure
I really like that, because it's amazing that when we're flying, it seems that I think what attracts almost all of us to flying is that you can't be doing something else when you're flying. You're not thinking about your bills. You're not thinking about your girlfriend. You're not, you're fully in the moment, but you're not fully in the moment a lot of times. I mean, there are a lot of times in a flight, even in a competition, where I'll have to grab myself and go, get back in the game, dude. Where'd you just go for the last couple of minutes?
Yeah. So what another story about this. You asked me about Brazil. I was there 3 weeks ago for the PVC. It was not the last task. It was the one before the last task. I was getting into goal, full speed, and I usually I have very few collapses, very few. And 66 meters from the end of speed section, I can tell you the distance because I checked on my log track afterwards. I had a full collapse. The wings started spinning, a huge and nasty cravat on my left side, and so on. So, to tell you the full story, I didn't sort it out first. First, I went to the last 66 meters to have my time. Then I was too low to stall my glider to clean out. So it was an interesting moment. But I sorted the thing, and I could climb back to the line and to finish it. But and the goal line was like 5Ks after. So I kept on thinking, but where was my mind? Where was my mind? And I can't tell you. I think that for some personal reasons, my mind was not set on the comp. I was distracted by some other things. And I cannot tell you how and why it collapsed, and I cannot tell you what I was thinking. So the conclusion is, be focused and keep your mind on what you're doing, because you are flying. Those machines can be animals sometimes. So
yeah, this is jumping around a little bit, but I paid a lot of attention to the World Championships this year, partly because a very good friend of mine and co-X-Alps pilot Cody Matank, a guy I train with quite a bit. He lives here in Utah. Did really well. He had a great race and in Macedonia, but I was watching it too, because it seems like, one of the things we learn when we first started getting into comps, and you talk about in your book, and you make this distinction really well, but I think it's worth fleshing out, is we used to fly very much glide to goal was what we were paying attention to in our instruments. It was foolish to, be thinking too much about glide to end of speed. But now clearly everyone is flying glide to end of speed and then worrying about getting into goal. I mean, it just again and again and again. If you were flying glide to goal in the World Championships, you were in the 50s or back. You just had to hammer it to end of speed and then survive. It's an interesting change that, well, I don't know if it's a change. You should remark on that. I've been in the game not nearly as long as you have in terms of competitions, but this seems to be an interesting change.
Yeah, it's you're totally correct about this. It happened in the past, but not that often. Yeah. The frequency of it happening is, and it was dramatic in Macedonia because on many occasions, even pilots like Julien Wirtz or Charles Cazot landed out due to that fact that they went down to the end of speed section and then they couldn't climb up and make the line. So I'm not totally at ease with this personally because I think the risk, not the physical risk, but tactical risk is so high. Sure. The point is that when what's at stake is a world champion title, so you may be tempted to play the game, and we are playing a game also that is a bit different from the good old days. It's a bunch of 50 guys coming together to goal, and when 49 guys decide to glide and to get low at the end of speed section, do you want to be the one guy who is smarter and will make the end of speed section higher and go, and then be sure to go to the goal line? Well, you won't be that smart so long because you'll be 3 minutes behind. So, and if you want to play the game, you have to, you have to play with the others. So it's more about tactics and the way we fly together now, which is much more homogeneous. We are not that far from. I'm not sure about the word in English, but we are flying single class competition more or less. While in the past we had 10 different gliders that were available. Now it's a bit different. I'm not complaining. It's simply a fact.
Sure.
And I'm really happy with the gliders we are flying nowadays.
In your book, you do a great job of talking about, when you're first really you're flying a lot of your first comps, the first thing you really have to get good at is just the technical aspects. You have to become a good climber, you have to become a good glider, you have to learn how to stay with the gaggle. But then there's a jump. You have to win tasks, to get on the podium. You really have to. Russ Ogden always talks about discipline in terms of not being the rabbit, not doing crazy things too early, not leading out. And you talk about the difference in leading out in the mountains and in the flatlands, which is great to call out the difference. But you do have to start learning how to brake and how to kind of follow your own intuitions like you did so fantastically in Serbia. But it seems like we've had quite a few pilots on the show that have talked about to know how to do that, they have to spend some time being the rabbit. They have to spend a few years bombing out a lot. How do you approach that?
But to be honest, that's also the fun part of being the rabbit, So don't we practice for fun? So we do. And some pilots will be rabbits for the full extension of their life, and that's good for them. So, but if you want to climb the ladder, and each step is more difficult than the previous one when you are going up the scale. So, making progress is possible for everyone, but somehow the marginal gains are getting smaller and smaller, but the effort to make those gains are getting higher and higher. And what you described, it's about your mental attitude and the mental control you have on yourself. So that's why I stressed out so much about the mental preparation. And I also, we discussed about this personal journey, but yeah, I guess that if you want to reach the top position, you have to get a grab on yourself and to have an extreme control of the way you act and behave and take your decisions. That might be counterproductive in terms of fun. But that's a balance that everyone has to find in between feeling good for being a champion, or feeling good because you're proud of what you've produced. Myself, I think I evolved in that regard. I was really looking for top positions for a long time, and then I think in recent years I'm still competitive. I think I really enjoy being at the top of the list. Be aware, but my priorities are a bit shifted towards fun instead of win.
Is that because, Maxime, of just time, the limited time you have, or just age and coming to a different realization about the sport?
Do you mean, do I feel wise?
Yeah.
I'm not so sure. I'm young. It's simply that others are younger than me. That's my
That's a great attitude.
About this is that I came to realize some years ago that I realized most of my dreams in paragliding. I wanted a lot, and I achieved a lot in my. It's not pretentious. It's simply I'm just telling you I'm proud of what I done, and I'm happy with this. But for some ambitions that I had, it has been very hard for me to accept that sometimes you have an external, non-controllable cause on which you have no leverage or no influence. For example, to qualify for a world championship. That's something I've never been part of, and I will never be part of. And that has been really hard for me to accept that. It's kind of resignation, but I never resigned. It's simply that I've never been selected, and that's the point. But accepting this, I don't mean it's fair or unfair. I don't mean this. I mean that I had to realign myself and to re-question the motivation I had and the goals I set for myself. And once I went over that hurdle, then it was clearer the reasons for me for flying, for traveling, for discovering new sites, for racing with friends. That's what I'm looking for, and I'm happy when I do that. At the end, with all those things that are clear, I'm competitive. It's because my mind is clear that I'm doing good things. And if my mind is foggy, or if I'm under the influence of external influence, then I won't be good. And I prefer to be clear with myself and to have my own goals. That's what I want to say. Yeah.
I was going to say for you to qualify for the World Championships is a lot different than for us. You come from a tough country, man. There's a lot of talent.
Yeah, we have a volume and a quality of this volume of pilots that is really impressive, and they are all my friends. Be aware, I respect them as human beings, as pilots. They most of them are really good friends. So level in France is incredibly high. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's very impressive, and the support system you have, and the coaching like you're talking about, and the I mean, I'm sure just the funds. There's so many more people, so there's more people contributing to the sport. We're very jealous.
Yeah, we also have a very good terrain. We have a high density of pilots. The economic level of our country is not so bad, and so yeah, we have a good number of excellent pilots, and there will be more in the future, I guess.
Yeah, of course. Talk about weaknesses and how you you clearly you spend quite a bit of time in both books on we talked about the journaling, but how do you learn from them? How do you incorporate that into becoming a better pilot?
Well, my opinion is that maybe with the exception of Krieger, you cannot have all abilities. You cannot be good at everything. You cannot. Failure is part of the game, or weaknesses are part of the game. So I think they are necessary to be identified for you as a pilot, because first, maybe you want to train them and to be better at them, so they are not any more weaknesses, but some will remain weaknesses. So you have to identify them so that they are not an obstacle for your own performance. You can be, what kind of example can we take? Maybe you're not good at following others. Well, then it's difficult in the kind of game we are playing now with the goggles. But then you will develop other abilities and other qualities like the analysis or the technical skills or the ability to climb fast, or your decision-making process will be maybe better. So you will play on your assets so that your weaknesses are not obstacles. I'm convinced that we are playing a game where everyone is making mistake. It's very difficult to complete a full week of competition and being able at the end of the week to say, I have not made a single mistake. So the point is that we are making mistakes, but we want to minimize them in terms of volume and of consequences. And even if we are making a mistake, we must be self-aware of them so that we can correct them the fastest possible.
I skipped over something earlier that we should have talked about with the physical preparation. Again, you spend time on this on both books, which I love, because it's not just that we might have a 5-hour task, and those are rarer and rarer these days, but we are looking to fly for a long period of time, and when you add up the hour before the start and then maybe 120K task, and you might have a tough section, it could very easily turn into a 5-hour task. But like in the flights like Alex is doing, or 10-11-hour tasks, you say for a pretty typical 5-hour flight, you could easily burn 4,000 to 5,000 calories. So it's not just the expenditure of the energy, that's massive. That's a huge caloric need that day after day really adds up, and especially something like the World Championships. But what with my trainer for the XOps, what we're always talking about too is just the resilience and the durability of the body. You can take a pretty hard landing if you're fit and just walk away. You can't do that so much if you're a heavy smoker and you've never been to the gym.
Right. So I totally concur. You summarized it quite well. I think it's necessary for the performance, for being fit for one task. It's also necessary for the recovery, so you're able to reproduce your effort, and also to have your mind correctly working, because your brain is a huge energy consumer. So if you want to think right, you need to eat right. So and you also need to drink right. So that's what I try to stress out with the the kind of food you decide to eat in the morning or during your flight or at the end of the day is important. Maybe when you're young and full, you can do whatever you want and your body will just manage it. But on the long run, it does not work that good, in my opinion. So that's why I went. We have an institute for sports in France for Olympic sports, and they have very interesting literature about the way we have to monitor food and the way we have to monitor or hydration. And the point with hydration is that once you are dehydrated, it will take you a very long time to recover. It's not simply, oh, I feel thirsty and I will have a drink and then it's over. No, if you're dehydrated, you'll be dehydrated for a long time. And that's not something that we want to face. So that's why we have to regulate our food intake and the water as well. I think also that what you pointed out is very important. I had to use my rescue 4 times. Twice I smashed into a cliff, and when your body is put under so much pressure and also shocks, the fittest you are, the best, because it will be better for absorbing the energy of falling down on the ground, but also it will be better for your recovery after. So it's not only a matter of efficiency and being fit during the task, but in my opinion, it's also a matter of safety to be fit.
Could we talk about maybe if they're all interesting, all of them, but the more interesting reserve toss that you've had? You said you have 4, but I always think these are great learning opportunities, unless they were just benign. But it doesn't sound like it if you crashed into a cliff.
As soon as I pronounced that word reserve, I thought I just understood that you were asking about this. So yeah, we can. I'm open to discussion about this. That's fine. Yeah, they all happen in over 2 years. So it was a specific period of my career when I was making fast progress. And sometimes playing with the limit, you sometimes step over the limit. So I think it's the summary of my story of reserve tosses. One of them was due to equipment. I had a riser failure, so this one we can skip out. The story behind is nice because it was in South Africa and I landed out and I had 3 hours walking under the sun and monkeys and snakes and so on. But the flying part was to be summarized to a riser brake failure. So that's it.
Wow, never even heard of that.
Yeah, when you're sponsored, your equipment manufacturer is not really willing you to tell you about this. So
okay, we'll leave that one.
Okay. Now about the others, yeah, it's about flying fast along cliffs. 2 of them. One of them happened in Saint-Hilaire, the other in Linz during the European Championship. And it was times also when we were flying prototypes. So I had either carbon rods or fiber rods into my wing, and those were prototypes. So I'm not blaming them. It's simply that I could not get control back over them. And I had to use my reserve, and I finished that story by banging on or not only banging, but also walking, under my reserve, walking on the cliff to stay away from it. So I was, horizontal. And in Saint-Hilaire, I landed in the cliff, and my reserve was hooked over some kind of root. And I was on a very small my vocabulary is too short there, but I was on a very small step, flat on the cliff, and so I was okay there. I was wondering, well, if the chopper comes to pick me up, how will he manage to get here? But then there was a thermal passing by, and so my reserve reinflated and de-hooked me from the cliff. So I had a second flight in the same
no way.
The same day. Yeah.
Those are spectacular cliffs. That must have been exciting.
Yeah, that was that's an interesting memory. Yeah. Yeah. And the one in Austria, it was due to my failure to. What happened is that we had a turn point that was slightly off the cliff, and I was in the front, like in top 5 of top 10 position, and we were in a +4 against the cliff. And then I could see above the cliff that there was a nice water cloud. So I said, it's maybe better to get far from the cliff right now before getting on top to avoid the water effect. So I was the first one to slightly curve my route, to get away from the cliff, to go to the turn point that was not so far. And I was the first one to collapse. And it was not a nice collapse, so I had 2 cravats and so on. So I stalled my glider. And it took me a very long time to stabilize the stall. And once I cleaned out the glider, I said, okay, now I have a window to release the glider, but falling along the cliff did not give me a clear position of the horizon. So when I decided to release the glider, you know that you have a window of opportunity. It's when your glider is in front of you that you should release your glider when you're stalling. My glider was behind me. So I made an attempt to infinity tumble before it existed, and I failed. I clearly failed, and I fell into my lines, and so that was over. So I used my reserve, well, that's the story. You wanted to hear it. This one was really traumatic for me because it happened during a European Championship. So I was so proud of being of representing my country. It was so important for me, the country flag and so on. So I was really disappointed about what was happening, and also the conditions. I think I was not in the right mindset again. It was the first flight of the camp, and it had been a very difficult process to get to the start point of this first task. So I think I was.
You mean with you mentally, it was very difficult to get to the start point, or just the actual race, like they had weather or something?
No. The process to be present on takeoff that day.
Got you. Yeah, you were distracted.
Yeah, and but this one, I took it seriously because I really asked myself, "Hey, is it really something I'm looking for in life to smash into cliffs, or what about my skills? Am I out of my abilities here?" Or so I stopped flying for several months. I looked for some expert and psychological support. I went to meet the first one that was recommended by my federation, but it's a matter of match. So I think our personalities did not match. I did not like the guy, but he gave me some very interesting books to read. He helped me understand some mechanical behavior of our mind. So it was very profitable for me.
Yeah.
But the guy was not the right one. So I found another one who was a former high-level sports guy, He was practicing kung fu and karate and so on. So, but whatever. In a matter of couple of hours or maybe 3 times I met him, I could have a clean plate in front of me. So it was, I found my answers and I found my solutions, and I came back to flying because that's really something I like, and I went back to the practice hill also to practice more and to increase my ability to recover collapses and to also prevent collapses. Since then, it was in 2010, I never had any more major incident in the last 9 years. So, but it was really necessary to go through that. It was, I'm talking of this maybe with some distance now, but it was really necessary and really important for me.
Can you summarize? I want to dig into that. Can you summarize? Because I think a lot of us, a lot of pilots have dealt with what you're describing there. I would call like a fear injury. You called it traumatic. Throwing your reserve going into the lines the first day, but there was also, beyond the fear of and the incident, it was the trauma of representing your country and being at the Europeans and being the first day. Can you summarize what he did for you and the work that you had to do?
Yeah. Well, it's a long time ago. And also, I think I'm not denying things, but also maybe I'm forgetting things. I'm telling you again, I'm young, but you're younger than me, so maybe I have some trouble with my memory. No, I'm serious now. Yeah, it's about your motivations. So that's a kind of starting point. Why are you doing this? But also, for what are you doing this? What is your benefit of practicing? So that's not a motivation, that's a result. And what can you bring home once you've done a nice flight? And so it helped me to see clearer into my motivations. Maybe also in that period when I was making fast progress, my ego was not, well, maybe overdeveloped, but it was a very pregnant thing. While the pleasure, the ambience, the sharing time with friends and so on was something that I could not see, but in fact that was my real motivation, And so I came back to traveling, meeting people, and discovering new sites. That's what is important for me. Also, it helped me in identifying better my own personal values. My values are what are my core beliefs and core characteristics that will help me define my action and my course of action. And I can tell you, for example, that work is something important for me, but justice as well. And I felt like I'm hurt when something I feel is not fair, for example, or fairness, if you don't like justice. Respect is something very important. So I have to respect myself, I have to respect others, and I have to respect the conditions. And so once you have made that list of 3, 4, 5 values, it will give you a clear bearing of, first it will give you a clear position of where you are, who you are, and then the bearing of where you want to go and what's the reward you expect and you will deserve once you follow your own path. And yeah.
Your book it's so timely for me because I'm going through a lot. I think motivation is such an important aspect of this, and when you talk about this in your book very well, but for me, when you're first learning, and you go to comps not to win, but to learn. You know they're going to be good they're going to be great teaching tools. You're going to learn a ton about all the technical aspects and also tactics and all the things you talk about in your book. And so they're quite, at least for me, they're quite easy to enjoy. And then things shift, and then it's, oh, I could actually do really well here. And so your motivation shifts. And part of where I'm struggling in my own flying career right now is that I try to look forward and anticipate what that could be like. So the big projects I've done, like the Rockies Traverse or the Alaska project, what's so hard about those is that they end. What's so hard about the X Alps is that it ends. You put so much effort into the training and the preparation and the logistics and the team, and then you have this magnificent experience, Alaska, Rockies, whatever, comps, and then it ends. And so right now I'm in this position of trying to decipher the correct motivation for the future. Is if I put a ton of energy into competitions and you win a super final, for example, or you win that's fantastic. That's a lot of fun, but who cares?
Yeah, right. Yeah, right.
I don't know what my question is there, but you talk about this very well in your book, and it's just, yeah. I mean, it seems to me like the more sage path is the one you've chosen now, which is to just go do it, to have fun, and to be with your friends. I don't know. I'm not sure what the question is. It's more just let's have a conversation.
No, but I see the course of the discussion, and I think it's about self-assessment and self-awareness. There are lots of works at the moment about what is called full consciousness, but it's really there are many works, medical works, about the way our brain is working and how social it is or emotional our brain is. It's not only rational. And what you're describing is that you prepare yourself to suffer and to participate into an event, and when it comes to the end, well, you're lost.
Yeah.
But the point is that were you present during the execution? Were you there in the moment where you performed? Was your mind open to grab all the positive vibes that were around you when you were somewhere lost in the X Alps or somewhere lost in the Rockies? If you're simply struggling and willing to do well or willing to achieve a certain result or to prove things to yourself or to others, maybe you are not in the right. I'm not criticizing Gavin. Be aware.
No. You're talking about extrinsic and intrinsic. You do it really well in the first book. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's about being, there is a saying in I don't know if it translates well into English, but for many sports, it's about being myself here now. So I have to get rid of whole pollution. I have to be in the present and not in the past or in the future. And I have to be at the task at hand and not at doing something else. So it means that you need to live in the moment. Well, it's a kind of philosophical philosophical sentence at 2 cents, but and I think it can help as well to not feel that emptiness after an event, because you will not be empty if you are filling up yourself during the event of everything good that you are doing, and you are doing this thing because you like it, because you enjoy being there. So you must be aware of your joy at that moment when you feel it. And if you don't feel it, maybe you should look for another activity.
Yeah, I did all these interviews with a bunch of the athletes after the race. We're just about to release our third one, and this was a very common theme. Kriegel talked about it in his 2009, his first campaign in 2009, and in 2011 that he kind of went into a really dark place afterwards, and he's solved that by now he has just more goals. Before the race even starts, he's already has goals for other events that he's doing. And for me, I want to not have to have other goals to fill that space. I want to delve into that space. I want to live in that and understand it and feel it and not solve it. I don't know if it's even solvable, but like you said, be present in the being done with the race. These are parts of life that we have to go through, and it can't all be the rush of the X Alps. That's ridiculous. But I think that's what we all struggle with, is that adrenaline, that high, that the things that we feel in competition are very lucrative for our minds, and it's hard to give it up.
Yeah, what you describe about the goal setting also is very important in my opinion. If you simply have one goal that is too easy, then you will not be so happy about reaching your target. And if you have a goal that is too high, then it's going to be difficult and you may resign. But having only one goal, I think it's not a good idea. Having several goals and intermediate steps I think it's the right approach, and it will help you develop also your self-esteem. So every time you reach an intermediate goal, hey, you made some progress, so you can measure it, and then you have a tangible way of assessing yourself in a positive way. So this goal setting is really important for self-esteem, your self-confidence, and your motivation. And yes, what I'm not so surprised about what you said about Kriegel and the change he had to do, because also Kriegel is having, I think, quite good mental preparation.
I think he spends a lot of time on that. I think his confidence is consistently there's all the reasons that Kriegel is Kriegel, but I think it's the confidence. To me, it's the confidence that stands out, and I think about it constantly, even during the race. That it becomes so imperative to stay in the air. It's pretty hard to fly as fast as he does because he's so confident he's not going to deck. But in the X Alps, I mean, it's not the same as in a PWC. If you bomb out, you've got FTV working for you, and you have a lot of and you get in a car. In the X Alps, you've got to run up another mountain again, and you've maybe lost 2 precious hours of the day, and that's the difference. But his confidence to consistently take risk and to gamble, not risk with his life. I'm not talking about that kind of risk. I'm talking about just flying fast and flying low and flying straight. Man, that's a whole nother level.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. I participated in several I Can Fly competition here in France and around, and I remember it's funny because I participate twice in the air tour, and the first one I spoiled it because I decided to take off in conditions where I shouldn't have decided that. So hopefully a tree was there to save me and to grab my tip, my glider's tip when I inflated. And I was grateful for that because the flying would have not been nice. So, but then I felt so stupid because I was exhausted. I was willing to move forward. I was not so bad position, so I was playing the game of the race and so on. So, but I was really angry with myself. I spent the next day walking. I was not able to decide whether it's a nice grassy slope with a light breeze was good to be used as a takeoff. I was simply pissed off with myself. I needed to exhaust myself. by walking the day after. And 2 years, the 2 years after, I participated again in the air tour, and then I was with a friend again in a rather good position, and we were facing, we were on top of a mountain. It was quite windy. He decided to take off, and I had still the memory of that previous edition. And I say, no, I don't feel it. I will not do it. And then I went down, went up again on another takeoff, and so on. So I lost the race there. And I was again so pissed off with myself. So making decisions under so much stress and exhaustion, well, that's another level. And you went through that also, much more than I did. And the combination of physical exhaustion together with having decisions to take is a really difficult game. I'm impressed by the low level of accidents also. I think we have such a preservation instinct that helps us under such situation. But you will be the interviewee, I will be the interviewer the next time we talk about this.
It is remarkable, the lack of accidents. I mean, there were a lot of people that had to pull out with injury in 2017, which was interesting because the weather in 2017 was really terrifically bad, and it was basically just flyable or not flyable, but there were still a lot of accidents, mostly that early on with all the fern. But the 2015 race, for me at least, was way scarier because we were flying in a lot of wind almost that entire race, with a couple of exceptions. You know, day one was perfect, but the rest of it was so windy. And it's really interesting to me, the headspace that I think most of the people in the race get into. You get into this headspace where nothing is going to go wrong. You have the move day after day. You know you're exhausted, and you know that you're probably not, but it just doesn't matter. It's very strange. I mean, literally the day after the race, I would go flying in conditions that are half that bad, and they would be terrifying. I wouldn't be able to handle it. I'd go land. It's an incredible. I guess you talk about flow in your book. I guess it's like an extended state of flow that you get in, where you just have the move. I've got this. I'm sure that's part of the addiction.
Yeah, it's I have read years ago a definition of flow in Conscription magazine, but I think the definition I have, or maybe it's the French approach to that, is a bit different. It's when you don't need your cognition. You don't need to make a decision. Your body will act according to the feelings you have. So it goes direct from information to action, overstepping the decision phase. There is no decision. It's you're simply doing things because that's the things to be done. You are fully, as we said before, you are fully yourself there in the moment, and there is no distraction. Also, it's a state where the time passes by quite slowly. You have the impression that everything is slow, and you have the impression that everything is smooth, a bit blurred, and you have to be light on the booze also. So I'm not talking about this. So you have to be fully in possession of your capabilities to do that.
I totally agree. Maxime, I've got pages and pages of notes here, but I also want to be mindful of your time. If you wouldn't mind, there's just, I kind of wrote some highlights of many different aspects. So these aren't necessarily in a particular order, but feel free to answer them in a long format. But could I just touch on some topics in your book, and you expound however you want, and some of them you might not want to expound on at all, but like for example, fly full bar permanently if climbs are greater than 2 meters. Talk about that, but in relation to the time of the beginning and the middle and the end of a competition, because we talk about, you don't fly, you typically don't just press the full gas in the first third of the race. You're a lot more conservative, you're being disciplined, you're flying in the gaggle, but anyway, talk about that.
Yeah. So, by the way, I might write another book in a couple of years because things are evolving a bit. But first of all, we are discussing here about speed, and everyone has to be aware that to fly fast, you have to climb fast. It's not because you're flying fast that you will climb fast. It's the other way around. You have to be first a good thermal pilot. You have to first focus on your abilities to climb fast in thermals. Then you'll be in a position to fully use the full extent of your speed bar. Then about this flying at full bar as soon as there is a plus 2 meters per second, it's a matter of relation to the Mach ready. And that's the first point. The second point is due to the fact that we are flying in gaggles, so that the time to identify and center a thermal is reduced compared to someone who is flying alone across country flight. So about this Mach-ready thing is the Mach-ready theory tells you that if you anticipate a certain value at the end of your glide, then there is an optimal speed to be taken. So the stronger the expected thermal, the faster you'll fly. And the second point is about probability. When you fly in a gaggle, the probability to find or to go through a thermal zone is getting much higher than when you're one or only two pilots isolated. So this will increase your tendency to fly fast, because you will gain from a stronger thermal without losing time for looking for it. Then about the use of the speed along the course of a task. I think that's where things have changed a bit in the recent years. Yes, people tend to be conservative at the beginning, but that's not so true. It's also depending on who is present there and the perception they have of what is called the leading bonus. And some pilots are tempted to go in front at the beginning of the race because they think they will be rewarded by more leading bonuses. So that's a psychological effect, but that can raise the pace of the race. And yes, the closer you get to the end of your task, the friendlier people get. So because you feel the smell of going back home and you want to be the first there. So and you don't take full hate in thermal. You simply grab the best of it, and as soon as it decreases, you go for finding another one, and you are more going from bubbles to bubbles than from thermal to thermal.
And for those of you listening too, I think it's beyond the scope of the conversation now, because these are well, not necessarily complicated concepts, but important concepts that you really need to understand. And Maxime, you've done a really good job of that. But it's not just McCready, but Reichman and Cochran. These are sailplane pilots that have come up with some very good concepts. That it's quite, for me at least. It really helped to understand all three of those together, and to use all of those three together, and yet still understand where they don't factor for our speeds and our glide compared to sailplanes. So you have to kind of couple that on top of that. But I look forward to trying to put all these in my brain and utilizing them, because the Reichman and Cochrane were new to me. So I appreciate that you pointed those out. I'm not sure if you want to comment on this, but I love this quote, or I love this thought. The right question is not, will conditions improve, but are conditions good enough? I like that.
Yeah. Again, it's about. I would. That's you're touching something sensitive about the purpose of my books. I think, or I'm willing, my books to be for every pilot. But for sure, I have a competition background, a competition image. The name performance is really related to comparing yourself to others, while performance is about taking the best out of yourself and reaching your best possible level. That's what I would like everyone to reach. So the conditions. If you are flying in a competition, who cares about weather analysis? I'm sorry to be that bold, but everybody will be flying in the same condition. So if you're on takeoff waiting for conditions to improve, but the window is open and the start is in 15 minutes, or even if the start is in 1 hour, if the conditions are good, just take off and fly. Don't wait for something hypothetical or on which you have no control to happen. And that's true as well for flying. You have to be aware of the evolution of the conditions. Is there a veil coming? Is the wind picking up? What about shadows? So sure, you have to take the information as it comes, and you have to also anticipate on the evolution of those conditions. But don't bet on the future. Just take conditions as they are. I think it's related to what we said before.
Yeah, for sure. Touch briefly on, because I don't know that this needs too much more than what you put in your book, but this was also interesting for me to just think about, even though I think I think we all naturally understand it, but optimized waypoints and wind, tailwind, headwind, and then optimized waypoints and terrain.
Yeah, so about this, you have to be good with vectors to understand it. Maybe some drawing will be also interesting to help people understand. But if you are going headwind to a turn point, and then once you've tagged the turn point, you'll go backwind. So you're going north, for example, to a waypoint, you tag it, and then you go south. Every time you take a thermal in your way to the turn point, you will slightly drift backward. While if you go for the turn point, tag the turn point, and then go backwind, then the wind will drift you in the right direction. It's pretty easy to understand. Mm-hmm. And this can be turned into an equation and into a model to show you that if you are, for example, facing 10 or 15 kilometers per hour wind, and if you decide to take 0.5, in fact, you are just not climbing. You are on your glide ratio to the turn point. So it's not worth taking a 0.5 meters per second. But if you go to the turn point and come with the wind in your back, and you find a 1 meter per second, with 15 kilometers backwind, it's equivalent to a 2 meters per second. So it's maybe a bit difficult to understand, but what you read on your varier as the average speed of climb is not the real speed of climb, because it contains also a part of your drifting towards or backwards related to the turn point and to your goal. So that's when the wind is facing you or pushing you. And then about wind coming from right or left, then, for example, if you are two guys gliding together and the wind is coming from your right side, I would recommend you to slightly change your direction and be on the right side of the game, because if your friend on the left find a thermal, then you will be pushed by the wind to reach him. While if he's on your, or if you find a thermal, he will have to fight against the wind to reach your position. So it might be 5 meters, 10 meters gain, but hey, look at classification incomes now, and you'll see that every meter is important.
And I also liked how you pointed out, you have these great little summaries at the end of each chapter, but when in doubt, if you're thermaling in wind, and when in doubt, thermal towards the sun or towards the wind, or both. But it's such a, I mean, I think I've done that naturally, but I like that you put it in my brain.
Yeah, exactly. And I think
there's a lot of things exactly like that.
Yeah. It's we are doing things naturally, and also because we have experience. So not everything is conscious in our mind, but when you accumulate the experience, then your brain will keep what worked out correctly and what didn't work out, even without you being conscious of that. And that's why you're doing the right thing.
Yeah, and another unconscious one, but also really good to point out. In flatlands, we divide the sky up. You talk about dividing the sky up into the thirds layer, and this was one of the things I learned very early on. But when you're in a group, so when you're solo, that's really what you're thinking about. You're thinking about flying the terrain. If you're low, you're thinking about flying the clouds and the terrain. If you're in the middle, and you're just flying the clouds or the sky when you're up top. But when you add the group dynamic to it, then it becomes a percentage of that versus flying the people. And again, it's I think it's just these are good things that you've pointed out. I don't know if that needs comment, but yeah, I like that a lot. And then with mountains, so I had always heard the thirds regardless of flatlands or mountains, but you say drop it in the mountains and just you only have you forget the 2/3 and you divide it into 2 halves.
Yeah, you have terrain and you have the sky. That's it.
Yeah, no, easy. But again, I like the differentiation. Improving position. You talk about when you're solo, you're limiting collateral damage. I take that as just to be, try to limit the mistakes.
Yeah. Talking about this, that gives me an opportunity to talk about those leading points we mentioned before. I'm not happy with the way currently scoring is working. So, and especially with leading points, I think they are not rewarding the right qualities. And I will give you an example. Brazil, again, 2-3 weeks ago, in a 100 kilometers task, I stupidly decided to have an initiative on the first glide, so after 10 kilometers. And it did not work out. So you can call me stupid. I would be totally in agreement with you. But then I went on a chase mode to catch up with my friends that went away. I took a new start from where I was, and then I had a 5 kilometers disadvantage. And for the next 80 kilometers, I took all possible initiatives and I took my lines. I couldn't catch up with anyone because they were all flying together in a group in the front. So at the 80 Ks, at the 90 Ks mark, 10 Ks from goal, coming from a different line, I could top up the lead gaggle, and I was so happy with this. And then I could make it to goal, I would say, in the 5th or 10th position. What happened when the classification was out was pretty expected. I dropped out to the 60th place, maybe, or even worse, because I had no leading bonus. All those guys in the gaggle, we didn't take any initiative, but just flew together, good friends, they stay together. They had whole maximum attack points or leading bonuses, while I took all possible tactical risk and took initiatives and not being rewarded by this. So
Right.
I sorry, I slightly slided away from your question just to sneak my comment, but you see what I mean and what I feel.
Yeah, and I mean, and this is something that I just personally struggle with because I'm not, math is not. I'm not real strong at math. I'm not an engineer, but I see a lot of the really good pilots. Like one of my mentors is Josh Cohn. He's just terrifically consistent, and he's always one to watch. He's always a threat. And like you, he doesn't get a ton of hours, but he can show it up at a comp, and he's got a really good chance to win it, regardless of the level it is. But he's also one that I know like really understands FTV and really understands lead points, and he really gets into the details of all this. And I don't have that kind of mind. How important is it to really understand that, or is it better to just just fly the day?
I think not all of us are the same. So I think the answer is personal. So if you're there for the comp, you fly the comp, and that's it. And I don't see a very good answer to this question. In fact,
yeah. So, with the lead points, I don't know really what the best move there is. It just seems like I understand why they're doing it, but it doesn't, like you said, it doesn't seem like it's rewarding the right thing.
Yeah, the story behind is that if we come back to the origin of those leading bonuses, they were called early birds for the hang gliders. So the purpose of having those leading points in the system into the gap formula is related to Stargaze. Yes, right. So now we are trying to fix some wound or to fix some problem with not the right tool. And I designed another kind of scoring, the time-based scoring, and Jörg Ewald made a really great job of improving this, and now it's catching up on various countries, on various competitions. I don't pretend it's solving everything, but I think at least it's more legible and more understandable, both for the pilots and for the public. So because I really want to find something else. Those leading bonuses are not rewarding the right behavior.
You called out goal altitude or glide ratio to goal, and this was something I just felt kind of silly to not pay enough attention to, but I've never really paid much attention to goal altitude. I'm always looking at glide ratio to goal. So just briefly discuss why we should be paying attention to the other.
Yeah, so let's make things simple. We have wings that fly more or less at a glide ratio of 10. If we are facing wind, for example, maybe this glide ratio will drop to 7 or 6. A glide ratio compared to the ground. Because we have this front wind, headwind. The point is that maybe the wind could pick up only slightly by 5 kilometers more, and then your glide ratio will drop to 5.5 instead of 6. So you may think that it's not really important, but in fact it's really important. And the way you can assess the importance of this change in the glide ratio is the altitude above goal. This altitude above goal gives you the risk that you're taking. If you see that you had a 200 meters above the goal line at 6 to 1, maybe 5.5 will cut that by half or maybe reduce it to nil. So it gives you another perspective about your chances to reach the goal and the margin or the risk, tactical risk that you take for reaching goal. By the way, some instruments use a kind of security altitude, like maybe 50 meters, to be sure that you reach the line at 50 meters above goal, so that your glide ratio to goal is not compared to the ground, but to some virtual point 50 meters above the ground. And then you can compare your glide ratio to the glide ratio of your wing to see if you're on glide or above or below it.
Variable activation. You talk about biathlon, which I thought was a really good comparison. But can you talk about optimal activation point and body activation versus mind activation?
Yeah. So activation, we could describe it at the level of heating or energy of your body and mind. So we can clearly imagine that someone who is entering a boxing arena has a high activation, while if you're playing chess, you should have a lower activation than the boxing guy. And we are both boxing and playing chess while flying. So it's a matter of, first, when we take off, we will have, as we discussed before, we will have some energy consumption. We should be at the right temperature. And who amongst us is having a jog or even a stroll, a walk, before getting into the harness and walking to the takeoff? So we should warm ourselves before taking off, because we will produce some effort. And then during the flight, there will be phases when thermaling, when we are active, and we need to also have a good sensitivity, and we will be physically active with our arms. And then on glide, maybe we will use much less our physical abilities. We will still be pushing with our legs, but we will use a bit more of our mind. So this activation is to have the right level of energy and activation depending on which phase we are into. Are we thermaling? Are we preparing the future? Are we gliding? Are we seeking for thermal? All of this depends and will necessitate a different level of activation. It's not a big spread, but there are some variations around the average.
And that leads perfect segue into, that's all kind of decision making, and talk about the funnel.
Well, the funnel is something that I don't know if it's me, but it's a kind of a concept where before taking off, before the briefing, you can collect all possible sources of information. You don't have many decisions to make, but you accumulate information. And the more you go toward your flight, the more you have to narrow the possible annoyance that you feel from the exterior. I mean, it's like your vision. It has to be wide, and then you have to focus slowly into your own flight. And that's why I don't like to be interrupted when I'm getting into my harness, because that's when I want to stop interferences from the exterior. I just want to center myself on myself, and I don't need additional weather information or information about the course. I know it, so I focus on what I need in terms of resources to take the right decision for what's coming. What's coming is, do I take off or not? Do I turn left or right of the takeoff? That's what I need to think about at that moment. So this funnel is a kind of process where you start your day at the breakfast by chatting and by discussing and by taking all kind of possible information until the time you take off, and you have to be by yourself for yourself.
You have this thought on learning to lose. I'm just going to read this. This is directly from your book. I really liked the distinction here. learning to lose is not learning from failures. Learning to lose requires psychological work on oneself to be able to choose the right mindset. To learn from failures is to look for causes and correct. Is to
Yeah,
look for
there,
causes and corrects and then not respect them.
yeah, there is lessons to be taken from many experiences, So that's way of keeping your motivation as well, and not being at the bottom of the pit and sad and we are living experiences, and those will enrich us.
Yeah.
So I don't say that there is always something positive to be taken out of an experience. No, but there is something to be learned as a possible way of improvement, for example, or as something that you don't want to reproduce because you're not proud of it. And it's not necessarily like a strict positive attitude. It's also about an attitude of resilience, of being able to build from what you live.
Yeah, and I want to correct what I said there. It's not respect, but the last part of that was to learn from failures is to look for causes, correct them, and then not repeat them. I said respect them, which is totally different. Maxime, let's see. There's one more that I wanted to talk about, and then I've got to let you go. I know you got to go get your kids, and I could talk to you for hours. I can't wait to fly with you and actually talk to you at a comp. I'm sure that will happen one of these days. But just finally, back to decision making too. Actually, I'm going to completely change this. When I look at comps, the really high level comps, you very consistently see the same people. You have your incredible talents, and I would call them rabbits, like a Maxime, who's just an incredible pilot. But he's got a pretty good chance of being in the top 5 and also 80th because he pushes so hard. And I think that's part of he's trying to learn how to just consistently fly fast. But when you look especially in the last couple of years, you're in the top 10, you're seeing 6 or 7 of the same pilots over and over again. What have they really learned? And you talk about this in the book. Is there there are all the obvious things that they've learned, but how do you think of them?
Well, first I respect them, so
of course.
So I think of them in a great way. I think, in my opinion, consistency is really a differentiator, or something that if a pilot is consistent, in my opinion, that's what a good pilot should be. So, but that's an opinion, So maybe others will have different opinions, and also I think that we fly like we are, and pilots who are reproducing again and again very high level of performance, they are not nervous people in the life. They are calm, they are cool, and I think that's the pressure is having little influence on them. Some others, like Honor, well, they fly and they work with pressure, and that's also a source of motivation and energy for them. So, but most of the very regular pilots are smooth, no heads. And I'm trying to think. I think about my friends like Julien Wiertz, or pilots like this. Also, pilots that are not so well known, like Juris Vidic, and they are so consistent over the years and over the comps. I'm so impressed by what they are able to produce.
I think that cool and calm thing is a really good call out. I think that's, when I look at Kriegel, it's compared to everybody else in the X Alps, he's very cool. He's very calm, in many ways, he seems to be enjoying it the most because he's so calm. And so I think that's a good call out. That's a good point.
Yeah, and I think it's also self-fueling, the self-confidence, for example. So yeah, they are just aware and sure of what they can produce, and they have no doubt. So yeah, things are good for them.
Maxime, there's so much we can talk about here. Your books are packed with information. For those of you listening, if you haven't read them, go out right now, grab them. They're both on Kindle. They're just terrific reads. They're something I go back to over and over again. Thanks for helping me, Maxime, and thanks for helping so many of us with such great concepts and great things that we can really execute on. So thank you. You're a treasure. I really appreciate your work, and I can't wait to fly with you one of these days. I can't believe we haven't.
I really would like to fly with you as well, Gavin. I really appreciate, and that was a really nice conversation. We feel like we are passionate, and we could talk for hours about this, and it's really an interesting matter that we are sharing. We are a community, and it's a matter of passion and pleasure of this. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Gavin.
Thank you, Maxime. Talk soon. If you find the Cloud-Based Mayhem valuable, you can support it in a lot of different ways. You can give us a rating on iTunes or Stitcher, or however you get your podcast. That goes a long ways and helps spread the word. You can blog about it on your own website or share it on social media. You can talk about it on the way up to launch with your pilot friends. I know a lot of interesting conversations have happened that way. And of course, you can support us financially. This show does take a lot of time, a lot of editing, a lot of storage and music and all kinds of behind the scenes cost. So if you can support us financially, all we've ever asked for is $1 a show. And you can do that through a one-time donation through PayPal, or you can set up a subscription service that charges you for each show that comes out. We put a new show out every 2 weeks. So, for example, if you did $1 a show and every 2 weeks, it'd be about $25 a year. So way cheaper than a magazine subscription, and it makes all of this possible. I do not want to fund this show with advertising or sponsors. We get asked about that pretty frequently, but for a whole bunch of different reasons, which I've said many times on the show, I don't want to do that. I don't like having that stuff at the front of the show. And I also want you to know that these are authentic conversations with real people, and these are just our opinions, but our opinions are not being skewed by sponsors or advertising dollars. I think that's a pretty toxic business model. So I hope you dig that. You can support us. If you go to cloudbasedmayhem.com, you can find the places to support. You can do it through patreon.com/cloudbasedmayhem. If you want a recurring subscription, you can also do that directly through the website. We've tried to make it really easy, and that will give you access to all the bonus material, little video casts that we do, and extra little nuggets that we find in conversations that don't make it into the main show, but we feel like you should hear. We don't put any of that behind a paywall. If you can't afford to support us, then just let me know and I'll set you up with an account. Of course, that'll be lifetime, and hopefully you're being in a position someday to be able to support us. But you'll find all that on the website. All of you who have supported us or even joined our newsletter or bought Cloud-Based Mayhem merchandise, t-shirts or hats or anything, you should be all set up. You should have an account, and you should be able to access all that bonus material now. Thank you so much for listening. I really appreciate your support, and we'll see you on the next show. Thank you.